Over the past 2 weeks, we've looked at both Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, released in 1971, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, released in 2005. We've discussed their journeys to the screen. We had a bit of fun with them. And we learned how chocolate was made. Now, let's discuss the films together. Before beginning, let me clarify that this is not a better or worse thing. This is just what comes to my mind when we discuss these two adaptations. But that brings us to the topic we really should address. The fact that this isn't the case of one being a remake of the other, as so often happens, but rather both are adaptations from the same source. Recently, George R.R. Martin was talking about the problem of Hollywood with adaptations. The film is the film and the book is the book, they say. But that sidesteps the issue. There are times when a work has entered popular culture and already been adapted that one wishes to offer a different take upon it, to draw inspiration from a known inspirational story such as Sherlock Holmes set in the modern day, or Romeo and Juliet with vampires and werewolves this time. Problems creep in, though, when someone is adapting a work that either is not well known or hasn't been adapted before, and the person doing the adaptation says, "I'm going to make this my own." As Martin rightly notes, very rarely has someone done this and improved the work, compared to the ones who, make it worse. This is because the person who has chosen to make it my own isn't capable of creating their own original work and therefore is hijacking the creativity of others. I, who have never crafted anything inspiring before, suddenly know better than someone who did. Or, I have something to say, but I lack the talent to say it, so I'll take what you did and use that as a way to say it instead. This is not to say that adaptations must be a page-for-page, scene-for-scene transfer from book to film. That would not only be impractical, but foolhardy. There is a bit of truth in the film is the film and the book is the book, in that films and books are two different media. Jurassic Park, the film, and Jurassic Park, the novel, are based upon two different animals. The film has to be shorter. The film clocks in at 2 hours, 7 minutes. The audiobook at 15 hours, 10 minutes. That's going to require simplification in some of its aspects. There's not room for all of the novel's themes. So the primary one, that the degree of control required to bend nature to your whim is unsustainable, that one is kept. And the films focus on that rather than on the other things in there. For example, Science for Profit is presented more as a fiddling while Rome's burning situation, thinking about lunchboxes when the place is a death trap. Consequently, if Hammond the huckster capitalist is no longer needed as part of that theme, does he have to remain a huckster capitalist? Could he better fit the theme of the film if he instead was presented as a misguided creative who didn't realize that there are cases where imagination is preferable to reality because reality cannot be controlled? And if so, then the character of the PR rep could be split between Hammond and the lawyer, Hammond getting all the cheerleading of the park's potential and the lawyer the money grubbing of it. And as a shorter tale, it doesn't need another heroic character, so the lawyer, as the embodiment of exploitation, can meet his end via T-Rex. If you're going from a thick novel to a film, condensing the story, combining characters, focusing themes, and making the core ideas easier for the audience to follow, it's what comes with the territory. Changes aren't there to make it your own, but rather to fit an entire meal into a single lunchbox. So it would be absurd to say that change shouldn't happen, simply because of sheer length in most cases. And again, there's also the nature of the medium. One couldn't do a straight adaptation of Prelude to Foundation because part of it is prefaced on two different characters being the same person and the reader not discovering until the end. Something would need to be done, or, being a visual medium, the film would give it away. In other words, there are practical reasons that a work must change for adaptation. The issue is really when it's not being done because it needs to, but because someone, somewhere, has ambitions that typically exceed their talents. They want to tell the grand tales, but require someone else to either give their fumbling efforts legitimacy that they lack, or to do the hard work that they can then attach their own uninspired ideas onto. There are exceptions. Jaws and The Shining are examples where significant alterations, where the creative came in and made the material theirs, worked to great effort. But presuming one is a Steven Spielberg or a Stanley Kubrick is indicative of the arrogance that I'm talking about. With that, we now turn ourselves to these two adaptations of Roald Dahl's book, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. As noted, Roald Dahl originally adapted that himself, but it was substantially revised for the 1971 film by Seltzer because it was felt the straight transition from book to screenplay just didn't quite work. I know for certain some of the changes that Seltzer made, but I don't know every single one. Was it he or Dahl that removed Charlie's father? Who gave Charlie a paper route? Who introduced Grandpa Joe's tobacco habit? I don't know. But baked in was the fact that they wanted to adapt the book as a musical, and Dahl didn't like any non-Oompa Loompa musical numbers. That's the first point we should reflect upon. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is a musical. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory isn't. Now, I realize the latter contains musical numbers, but let me explain my view. In a musical, the music, songs, and dance are integral to the storytelling. Characters often break into song to express their emotions, advance the plot, or develop their character in a way that is not necessarily meant to be taken literally within the story's universe. The music is woven into the narrative fabric and serves as a primary vehicle for telling the story. Take Aladdin, for example. A whole new world is sung during the magic carpet ride. Now, there is most definitively a magic carpet ride. But the music is not there to say, and then they broke into song. This is an artistic presentation of complex aspects in an entertaining way, and one that could not be conveyed otherwise. A literal painting could not do what Munch did with The Scream, Van Gogh did with Starry Night, and Picasso did with Guernica, because it is the very absence of reality that allows them to convey emotions. With the obvious exception of Strange New Worlds, the musical numbers are symbolic expressions and not actuality. So in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, musical numbers are there to convey things to the audience. As I joked about, the candy shop owner isn't literally throwing candy to kids with no one ponying up any dough, except for the poor kid when he comes around. It's to tell us about how the world sees the titular character as the Candyman. And when Grandpa Joe gets up and dances, it's not that he spent 20 years being too damn lazy to get out of bed. It's a representation of how good fortune has restored vitality. And when Willy Wonka sings of pure imagination, he's providing us with insight into himself. In contrast, a work can include music and even singing and dancing without being a musical, in my opinion anyway. This is when the music and choreography are happening within the reality of the narrative. Characters sing and dance because it's understood to be a literal part of their world and behavior, rather than a method of advancing the plot or expressing internal thoughts. In Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the Oompa Loompas' songs are part of their natural behavior and culture, and their performances are seen as actual events occurring within the story's universe. And that's because that's what they were in the book. This is part of why I said that the two films can coexist. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is a musical, and is presented with the air of a musical. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is a film with fantastical elements, but nevertheless shows us an actual world. There's room for interpretation, certainly. It's very likely that Wilbur Wonka didn't rip out his house, drop it in the middle of nowhere, and continue to practice dentistry in it. It's more than likely a symbolic representation of Willy's estrangement from his father. But it doesn't have to be. It's a more fairy tale world, after all, in the old Brothers Grimm way. Thus, we bring to the shared views of both adaptations to the original, that some things needed to change in the move to a film. And first and most obvious has to be Charlie's journey, because in the book it's little more than an object lesson in being a good boy. He gains the factory, but not because he succeeds, but because everyone around him fails. Now, this is fine for a children's book, where it essentially could be considered a morality fable, and that each room offers a test that one child fails and Charlie alone passes all. Patience and obedience are virtues that are rewarded, the book says. However, as an adaptation, Charlie needs to have a climax of more than just passively avoiding wrong, but actively doing right. In Wilder's film, that's by returning the everlasting gobstopper to show his honesty. In Depp's film, that's by refusing a Faustian bargain of wealth, power, and fantastical opportunities that demands that he surrender his family. This is especially important for Depp's film, as Charlie is merely a silent witness throughout most of the tour. When he does speak, is typically only 1 or 2 words, roughly 24 or so lines during the entire tour. Through their resolutions, then, the two adaptations take Wonka in a completely different direction from each other. In Wilder's film, the absence of a father means that Charlie and Willy Wonka can have that relationship. Wonka hasn't simply found an heir, he's found a child that he wants to adopt as his own, a child who is honest and loving, that he can allow into his own heart. Wonka's embrace of Charlie at the end isn't just "we're happy," it's the ultimate form of pure imagination, to wish for a child of his own and to have that child come into being and want to be a part of his world and his life. The fact that he wants Charlie's mother and grandparents to come as well shows that this isn't selfish. His candy is made with love after all. The more love around, the better. Depp's flips that by having his Wonka look for nothing but an heir, to give him a legacy. The only love there is the love for creativity and perfection, and not for people. Rather than his moral goodness earning him a candy factory, his moral goodness rejects the candy factory. Charlie chooses love instead. And like a fairy tale, his moral goodness is rewarded. His father gets a better job, which can provide the family with enough to eat that the rest of the grandparents can even get out of bed now. And Charlie takes a good, honest, shoe-shining job to help support his family. In other words, Charlie refused to sell out. And it's Willy Wonka who's left to see that his world is vacuous. He's filled it with wonders, yes, yet even amidst the wonder, there's no joy anymore. This is the reason, then, that Depp's film has to continue. Charlie has proven he's worthy of being Wonka's protege, but Wonka has not yet proven he deserves to be Charlie's mentor. The tester himself is now tested to see if he can finally prove his is a legacy that is worth preserving. Or is it simply hollow? With the new climaxes in place for Charlie, both films needed to alter their structure to then support them. In the case of Depp's film, this involved creating Willy Wonka's backstory to also explain his eccentricities. Charlie rejects Wonka's offer because what he has is worth more than what Wonka is offering in exchange. The journey then shows why Wonka needs to rediscover what he's lost in order to see that what he's demanding from Charlie is everything, because the Charlie family is everything. What will it profit a man if he gains Wonka's whole world yet forfeits his soul? In Wilder's film, it's the introduction of Slugworth coupled with the stealing of fizzy lifting drinks that then sets up Charlie's climax. Slugworth similarly provides his hollow temptation of wealth in return for betrayal. This man lets Charlie into a magical place. Will he reward that trust and generosity by stabbing Wonka in the back? The fizzy lifting drinks not only provides the reason that Wonka can further test Charlie's honesty, will he take responsibility for his misbehavior, but it also provides Charlie with a more active role in the factory, even if it is his own disobedience. This makes his climax stand out all the more. All 5 children broke the rules. All 5 children are suitably punished. Charlie's virtue that separates him is not purity, it's atonement. He's not perfect, but he tries. Willy Wonka is looking for a good heart, not perfection. So in the need to change the one thing, is the spark that allows the two films to head off in opposing directions. Yet that is how they both gain a fairy tale atmosphere. Charlie's like a poor shepherd boy made into a prince, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory's Charlie is adopted by a wealthy genius full of love who wants to share that love with a worthy child. And his counterpart in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is a journey to a fantastical place that says it's not worth having if you can never go home again. Note, incidentally, how Charlie was prepared to sell the ticket to provide for his family, a sign of love that he would make that sacrifice for them. But Grandpa George takes it a step further by telling Charlie what he has is exceptionally rare, and he'd be a fool to give it up for something as common as money. This subtly foreshadows Charlie's climax. What he has, a family that loves him, is unique in all the world, in that he can't go out and find another one that will love him the way that his parents and grandparents do. And he would be a fool to give them up for something as useless as a candy factory. What makes Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory a bit more likely to stick is its Wizard of Oz-like aspects, which similarly allowed it to stick. The color, the fantastical, the quotable lines, the music. Had Charlie and the Chocolate Factory come out in 1971 instead, it seems less likely that it would have had the same incorporation into the cultural zeitgeist. That's not an insult, but note that Charlotte's Web came out 2 years later, and that's a great film. And yeah, it's not forgotten, but it certainly lacks the same cultural zeitgeist level of Willy Wonka. Now, if you asked me to pick one, then yes, I would choose the Wilder version. I prefer his Wonka to Johnny Depp's, and I like that the film ends with a loving embrace. But that's just a personal preference. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is impressive in numerous ways. Atmosphere, Oompa Loompas, Christopher Lee's capacity to do so much with so little. As I've said before, there's enough difference in the directions that they've taken as they've split from the source that really, these are two films that can coexist.